Hello, is this working? The classic opening line of every event as well. Oh, I've come unstuck. So, my name's Iain Morrison. I've got two hats tonight. I'm the partnerships curator at the Fruitmarket Gallery, and I'm also one of the poets involved in Writer's Shift. This book has just arrived downstairs hot off the press, otherwise I'd have like a big pile of the books next to me at the moment. But I hope you get the chance to have a look when we have the interval tonight. Writer's Shift has been a project that we've been doing at the Fruitmarket over a longer time than we initially thought we would. We've just come out of a period of renovation and expansion. This room that we're in now, our studio, used to be our staff office. In fact, I think I'm standing roughly where my desk was, so I haven't moved perhaps very much myself. While we were closed, we commissioned 4 other poets, Tom Pow, Janette Ayachi, Callie Gardner, and Jane Goldman, to write about the Fruitmarket in a very broad sense. The idea was that we would write about the past, the present, and the future with a license to follow our interests wherever it led us. And the poets that we worked with all had their own kind of flares and sort of unique ways of working that I thought would complement each other. So over the course of this evening, we'll be celebrating the outcomes of this project, which has gone in many different directions, not least into beautiful drawings by Kate Livingston, which are on show in the cafe downstairs. So we'll be able to see those in the interval tonight as well. But most importantly, it feels like for us, we wanted to mark Callie Gardner's contribution. Callie Gardner was one of the poets who sadly died last year after completing their work on the project. And very generously leaving it in a form that was able to be printed with confidence as we knew that they would have wished it to be. And all 4 of the rest of the poets really wanted to make some time tonight to read their work for them. So what we've done is we've put the work into the different voices of the rest of us. And we also have a recording of Callie reading their final poem from the last event we did in November 2020. It's a surprising work that Callie wrote. I mean, all of us went in different directions with it. Callie got really interested in the kind of serious but also the farcical elements of legalities around how art galleries and institutions work. They were very interested in what happens when you move artworks across borders and how that compares with the challenges of moving bodies across borders. And sometimes that being surprisingly more hard than actually moving the artworks themselves. That's part of it. They also, like a lot of the rest of us, found that the archive was a great resource while we were in the middle of a pandemic because they could use that when they couldn't come to the gallery. And it meant that they really dug into some of the files and had a lot of fun, I think you'll find tonight, with some of the kind of passive-aggressive correspondence between art institutions about who was paying for what and how would the couriers get the televisions from Dusseldorf to Kent and then on to Edinburgh, all of that sort of like hijapes that any of us that work in an art gallery know are the meat and veg of actually putting a show together. So it's a piece that, the playfulness in it belies the seriousness of how much we want to give light and energy to them and their contribution to the project. So I won't delay any longer, but I'll invite Tom Pow, Janette Ayachi and Jane Goldman to join me on stage, and we'll read Callie's work. Just welcome to the people who are joining us online as well. It's nice to be doing hybrid events. Hope you can all see us okay.
It's a big book.
So I'll just say the way Callie wrote for the project. The first poem that they wrote was from a trip that they made with Jane. Jane and Callie went off to Berwick-upon-Tweed to go to an event on archives at the Moving Image Festival there. So there's a lovely pair of poems that Callie and Jane wrote. After that, everything that Callie wrote for the project comes in this playful, numbered framework, a bit like a legal contract. So you'll hear us doing the numbers of almost they read like legal sub-clauses, but they give a kind of fun, percussive quality that just sort of holds quite a diverse group of work when writing together.
It's lots of fun.
Okay. So this is the first piece. It's called Art Workers. UIO Holly Argent / Kwai Kulik / Angela Y. Davis. Berwick upon Tweed, 21st of September 2019. Slime, waters and dust. Propaganda made to order. Closely analysing our own old records. We need more action, not more work. She follows her own fragmentary records, collages them as we watch. The train will be arriving on platform bus, and it is on the rail replacement service that I read Angela Y. Davis, Communist Women.
Her own opposition to fascism ran deep, for she herself had already been victimised by terrible ravages.
The reproductive labour is recorded also. He gives out the money, but not to the children. It is time to expose the conditions. Art workers, why are we poor? Well, many of us are not poor. I had a dream my wounds were finally healing at a wine reception, and I looked down and my drink was actually liquid tear gas, and also it was full of scabs. Being in competition with one another makes for an awkward environment, a bad odour. Think rotting flesh.
Charged with speaking without a permit, she was carted off to jail with her father.
Troubling cones make open works into social Klein bottles, home/work/politics. If your invisible kinships are non-recyclable, but it all gets thrown away anyway. So I am putting more and more of my shopping back. She sits in front of the camera and reveals the lump on her breast, like a tiny Christ in an 80s Pieta. It is unclear here who you and me are.
My sisters whom I can see in the night.
And on the walls of the fortified city.
1.1.
1.1.
Here's how arts become the extra state. Allow it to reproduce itself in horrendous mentality.
Adding a feminist H in the second position to Kalulu is beside
1.1.2.
the point.
In the Republic, Plato imagines an omphalostical origin for the ruling class whereby all their education is a dream.
In fact, they grew beneath the earth.
1.1.3.
And their weapons formed there with them.
We could scope, I suppose, an analogy where
radical pedagogy is by luckless sued forgot. It opens its pages and dumps its contents on their head. 1.2. 1.2.1.
Suppose you need a new artist for a project. You need someone from an underrepresented group, but also talented and to your taste. Such people don't emerge from any community.
1.2.2.
They are formed in the earth. given memories later of
1.2.2.1.
family,
1.2.2.2.2,
schooling,
1.2.2.3.
inspiration,
1.2.2.4,
influences,
1.2.2.5,
travels,
1.2.2.6,
and
1.2.2.7.
hardships.
1.2.3.
And thus, the quota is filled. The ground in those other anonymous world cities, and the autochthony is the freeish movement of educated and wealthy bodies, come what may. So where does art come?
1.3.
1.3.1.
From? Where do these people get their interests and preoccupations?
Of course, they are found in the tender wombus of Muksa earth herself, and they come with
1.3.1.1,
histories,
1.3.1.2,
contacts,
1.3.1.3,
but
1.3.1.3.1,
no friends,
1.3.1.3.2,
or
1.3.1.3.3,
lovers,
1.3.1.4.
and walk out of the mound with their powers intact.
1.3.2,
The foregoings fancy,
1.3.3,
but
1.3.3.1,
I
1.3.3.1.1.
saw dreamer BBs emerging from every mouth,
1.3.3.2,
took a fee for helping someone plagiarize their way into an MFA,
1.3.3.3,
legislated and financialized myself into writing things
1.3.3.2,
I
1.3.4,
really disagree with.
1.4,
1.4.1.
Plato had one thing right, which is that poets should be banned from the ideal republic. 1.5.1.1. If you spend any time with them, you may know this is still a sore point after 25 centuries.
1.4.2.
Because they tell lies. Poets will say that they tell the truth, but that is just what a liar would say. Certainly, poets would not be able to quatch up to the truth endorsed by philosopher kings,
1.4.3.
because they tend to run out of approved combinations of words and have to start making them up. Even today, you can just about get away with this, but it won't fly in the utopian future.
2.0.1. 2.0.1.1.
We still have customs problems for clearance of above-mentioned shipment, so customs authorities want a new fax copy of the pro forma invoice you send with the shipment for an amount of pounds.
2.0.1.2.
Please send this copy by return fax to avoid any further problems.
2.0.2. 2.0.2.1.
Must flight as booked.
2.0.2.2.
We are equal to the influences of new technology in our industry and are capable of producing a very professional package.
2.0.3. 2.0.3.1.
Dear sirs,
2.0.3.2.
please note, with immediate effect, we have appointed blank blank as our customs brokers. This instruction supersedes all previous instructions. Thank you for your cooperation.
2.0.4. 2.0.4.1.
Export formalities 175.
2.0.4.2.
Packing material and labour 1,260.
2.0.4.3.
Telephone and petties 1850.
2.0.5. 2.0.5.1.
I called you one day, but Leslie said you were very busy, so I didn't bother you.
2.0.5.2.
Why not come to London when we begin to unpack the show on June the 28th, 29th? I'm sure it would be useful to us both.
2.0.6. 2.0.6.1.
We are concerned as to the freight charges of blank and blank.
2.0.6.2.
Could you also explain the route the work took before arriving in Edinburgh?
2.0.7.
Cage-like structures with crates inside.
2.0.8.
To know, to retain, and to fix that which is sublime.
2.1. 2.1.1.
We still know clearance problems for shipment of above-mentioned shipment, so fax retains a new copy voice of the in-shipment you fix with this amount for an copy of pounds. Please, no.
2.1.2.
This fax by return problems to retain any further influences. We fix equal to the technology of new industry in our package and no capable of producing in a very professional flight, dear sirs.
2.1.3.
Must retain as booked. Please fix with immediate brokers. We have known that which is sublime as our customs instruction. This instruction retains all previous cooperation. Thank you for your customs.
2.2. 2.2.1.
I called you one day,
2.2.1.1.
but Elle said you were very busy,
2.2.1.2.
so I did not bother you.
2.2.2.
Why not come to London when we unpack the show on June?
2.2.2.1.
I'm sure it would be useful
2.2.2.2.
for us
2.2.2.2.1.
both.
2.2.
I called you one both,
2.2.2.1.
but you were very busy.
2.2.2.2.
I did not bother, sir.
2.2.2.3.
Elle unpack London.
2.2.2.4.
We come to the show.
2.2.2.5.
It would be June day.
2.2.2.6.
Why am I not useful for you?
2.2.2.7.
Sure, it would be us.
2.2.3. 2.2.3.1.
June were useful bother to busy youth.
2.2.3.2.
Elle, London, come. I am sure I called.
2.2.3.3.
You were one to be the why.
2.2.3.4.
But I not so. Us would unpack very both.
2.2.3.5.
Day would not show for it, did we?
2.3. 2.3.1. 2.3.1. Expert formalities. 2.3.1. Packing material / labour. 2.3.1. Telephone and petties. 2.3.2. 2.3.2.1. Formalities export petty. 2.3.2.2. Telephone labour. 2.3.2.3 and packing materials. 2.3.2, 2.3.3.1, a grumpier kilt beamed. 2.3.3.2, oh pain, tease a prolix rift. 2.3.3.3, the plot dances on. 2.4, 2.4.1, we five are naturally concerned. 2.4.2, as if it were possible to leave, freighted or charged with memories of this and that. 2.4.3, could even you, 2.433.1, who also see 2.4.4, explain the longer route 2.4.4.1 around the consciences. 2.4.5, the work took before arriving in Edinburgh.
2.5. 2.5.1.
Cage-like crates with structure inside.
2.5.2.
The inside structures of crates are cage-like.
2.5.3.
I like a cage, found structure inside.
2.5.4.
A fond sage, rusticated to design.
2.5.5.
Defunded to a gasp the dingy, rusty case.
2.5.6.
Erased desire, fed the stray pages.
2.5.7.
In disgrace to a carcass fire.
2.5.8.
Thus caressing a dire feast. 3. 3.1.
3.1.1.
February the 1st, 1937. The United States opens its first foreign trade zone on Staten Island, New York City. Goods could now enter this 92 acres of land and water without being subject to duties or taxes. 3.1.1.1.
I'm not saying taxes are good, but the more money you have, the more likely you've done something unethical to get it. And they pay you for what governments owe any person they make suffer.
3.1.1.2.
The indignity of living in a nation state, her existence subsumed into the seething, ceaseless mass of flag and pride, as
3.1.1.2.1.
tissue,
3.1.1.2.2.
foreign object,
3.1.1.2.3.
ejector,
3.1.1.2.3.
etc.
3.2.
Goods in the foreign trade zone can legally be
3.2.1.1,
stored,
3.2.1.2,
displayed,
3.2.1.3,
assembled,
3.2.1.4,
tested,
3.2.1.5,
repaired,
3.2.1.6,
manufactured,
3.2.1.7,
sampled,
3.2.1.8,
manipulated,
3.2.1.9,
salvaged,
3.2.1.10,
relabeled,
3.2.1.11,
mixed,
3.2.1.12,
destroyed,
3.2.1.13,
repackaged,
3.2.1.14,
cleaned,
3.2.1.14,
or
3.2.1.16,
processed. 3.2.2.
assembled, But what of my or my lover's need or desire to be
3.2.2.1.
stored,
3.2.2.2.
displayed,
3.2.2.3.
assembled,
3.2.2.4.
tested,
3.2.2.5.
repaired,
3.2.2.6.
manufactured,
3.2.2.7.
sampled,
3.2.2.8.
manipulated,
3.2.2.9.
salvaged,
3.2.2.10.
relabeled,
3.2.2.11.
mixed,
3.2.2.12.
destroyed,
3.2.2.13.
repackaged,
3.2.2.14.
cleaned,
3.2.2.15.
or
3.2.2.16.
processed.
3.2.3. We are likely to be unfairly subjected to various laws and fees. 3.2.3.1 in the pursuit of our basic needs and sovereign desires.
4// Always in the market, a cento composed of lines from writer's shift poems by Jeanette,
Jane,
Tom,
Iain,
and
me,
except
except
line 42.
which is from Ian's moving gallery notes.
4.1.
We need more action, not more work.
to risk a hand.
In bent metal, somehow nettled.
Into an explosion of pieces at the harbour,
4.2. Oh, hello, I am a poem.
with a nettle of possibilities at play.
4.3. I had a dream my wounds were finally healing.
Posthumous, exhumus, humus.
Keep finding more rooms, more air, more art.
Among the headstones for a lump beneath.
4.4.
It was demolished and became a car park.
There will still be good things, we act like we've forgotten.
I am here today to stop thinking about you.
At
A wine reception, I looked down and my drink.
This year has been wiped down clean.
4.5.
Keep on looking up.
4.5.1.
But I am at an art gallery.
4.5.2.
A simulation of love in your photographs.
Was
Actually liquid tear gas and also
we can never leave as one of us is always reading a book.
4.6. I traffic in extinction too.
a belly of collective moves.
Revenge. And then when I was placed somehow in...
The empty city.
It was full of scabs.
And the streets floated up to my knees.
Defined by this step, we walk.
Prone to capsize and tip at any moment.
4.7.
Excuse me, are you looking for the castle?
Defying the point of emptiness with memory.
She follows her own fragmentary records.
To burn many incenses, isolating the right detectors.
Wrapped in light from leaf.
4.7.1.
A gift shop.
I thought so.
4.7.2.
As you relax into your own dulcimer.
I am putting back more and more of my shopping.
4.7.3.
Very little prospect in this society.
To stay intact and right forever.
4.8.
I want to acknowledge we stand.
Not chancing the inevitable.
I expect to learn new artists' names, yet always
Speaking without a permit. Of an exhibition which is the exhibition. 5.
5.
5.
5.
It was my job to Tommy Rumble, measure out some spit, be lost, afraid, among assembled people asking it. And as the wind slapped branches out of disciplining hands, I slept all night, the easy right to be equipped with scans, securely bought and soon forgot their scattering on the strand.
Thank you, Callie.
Thank you, Callie.
So yeah, we've got some time now. Do go enjoy Kate Livingston's drawings downstairs. It is just the beginning, yeah. And also the book is here. It's for sale for $9.99. So please look at the bookshop and have a flick through, and hopefully you'll find lots more to enjoy. We're back in here at 7:15, so you've got just over half an hour, and you can bring drinks back. The bar is open as well. Yes. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thanks. Thanks very much for coming back, and indeed more people for coming. That's nice. Thanks for being so close as well. Sorry. What we're going to do in the second half is we'll have readings from myself, Jeanette, Jane, and Tom. Who got the biggest whoop? Who? Oh, Jane fan is in the audience. Fair enough. It's understandable. So I suppose I thought maybe what I would just do before doing a few of my own poems is read a wee bit of the introductory essay from the book. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, it just sort of goes through the sort of genesis of the project and a bit of the contents, and I thought it might be nice just to say why these poets and this project and why it went together. So here's what I had to say about our assembled poets. I'll introduce the poet's aptness for this commission as it appeared to me. Janette Ayachi's poems are packed with rich visual imagery. She has worked for and spent a great deal of time in galleries. Her poems know how to bring personal, often sensual experience into tension and dialogue with artworks and cultural infrastructure. Callie Gardner's book-length poem, Naturally It Is Not, a poem in 4 letters from 2018, marks out their skill in handling manifold references and an ability to sustain dazzling thought over lengthy forms. The breadth of possible content here would play to these strengths. Making no distinction between her academic and creative activities, Jane Goldman writes with unabashed desire to communicate information that challenges received histories in poems that rhythmically rally and energize us, often working to uplift other women's achievement and experience. On my Southampton residency, I'd produced a book of poems, moving gallery notes. Thank you. And now in writer's shift, was keen to mine a personal admin hoard I thought could enable me, and you'll be the judge, to write interestingly about an organisation from an insider's position. Tom Pow showed an empathetic ability to reanimate marginalised historical voices in his collection Dear Alice, Narratives of Madness from 2008, which takes on the patient records of the Crichton Asylum for Lunatics that then became one of the Glasgow University campuses where Tom was working. Another of his books concerning the Atlas of Scotland and other poems from 2014 grew multidimensionally from a 6-month residency in the National Library of Scotland's Maps Department. I won't read more, but then I go into a bit of detail about what the different poems represented are and what they did. And also I'm delighted that as part of the book, there's a couple of other contributions. Some of Kate's drawings are reproduced beautifully in photographs from Chris Scott, who's photographing tonight. Photographing. And also some of my other colleagues in the Fruitmarket staff team have written either poems that came out of workshops that each of the lead poets did with the staff, and I know that a lot of people find that really stimulating. I mean, that not least like where your drawings came from, Kate, but also there's poems from Natasha, who's here somewhere tonight, and I'm trying to think of anyone else in the room. Sorry if I'm missing anyone who's got work in there. I'll say about Shola, but also that Ruth Brederick, who's watching online, she's in here. Elaine, our bookkeeper, everyone got into it, and it was thanks to the demystifying approach that the poets took that I think, took some of the kind of barriers away from just writing, which was lovely. So we've got some poems from them in the book. And then, of course, we worked in November last year with Shola von Reinhold, an incredible author who gave a talk about an exhibition called From Two Worlds, which was in large part a survey of POC artists that happened here in 1989. I might be getting the date wrong. But they wrote really interestingly about that, and their papers reproduced here, as well as the conversation that we all had in that event afterwards. So for that alone, it's worth the $9.99. Hopefully I've sold it more. Right, so what am I doing now? Well, for you, madam. Yeah, perhaps if you want it. Okay, so I'll just read a couple of wee bits that I did. I'll start. The last event we did, we were very focused on the archive. So in my head, at least, the theme for tonight is sight. And it's not just about the archive; it's about the presence of being here and what can happen when you engage with place. If you want to give it a highfalutin thing. Tom Tour has me thinking about surfaces, and after a smile, here I am writing this down out of Tom's slipway, so as to respect his what may be seen. Using the opportunity, thinking about Virginia and the mothers in here eating us across. But we don't have to be modern, are moderner all the time. We're accepting money and then conditions. Accounts for bold fringe, larger space, standing up, pushing out, inclined towards those who would benefit from feminizing, better to take photos. With permission, we're here to save a day in Broxtober, for weather is fundening. Pegs cataractual whose were somebody else's. How the scentage of their skin, Doric, mnemonic, lost for remembering their building, and that's a space fails a flame it may be inextinguishable from. Our guest could be more gustworthy. They are supported by at least 7 floor builders hard above us, or it is a party ball, glittery, showy core, a snowy shower, a showy shore. Generation is my game. Successive, resistual, spans spreading feist on trust. These were circular marks, read in comfort for each other. Maybe expensivest words ever did wrote. Growing still, tracking through wings, water, and apps. And I thought it might be nice to read a couple of poems that I wrote in the workshops that I was talking about that the other poets did. I tried to smuggle them into the staff section, but Fiona spotted them, that they were mine, so she was like, put them in your own section. I was like, okay, fair enough. Bolstering that. So let's see if I can find those. So it'll be 2 workshop poems you're looking for. You might find it before me, actually. That's right. So from Jeanette's workshop, which was looking at pictures from the Janet Cardiff and George Perez Miller show that we did back in 2008. House of Books. Books housing that thing that comes up about a space being enclosed, or whatever the opposite of enclosed is. Inopened? Closed in order to be reopened again. The books support the literacy, fluency, agency, not read through, read through at that point, or maybe builded into a strengthening. And then from Callie's workshop, where we were working with archival material, I was looking at the archive for an event we did with Saigo Kiang called Black Rainbow, where there was exploded black fireworks in Princess Street Gardens. Aye. Are you finding it distracting? All right. Well, yeah. I don't mind if people are finding it helpful. Or yeah. Well. No. I can wait. I'll wait for it because it's handy for the people at home. Sorry, Matt. You're being given conflicting instructions, but it gives me a nice breather. That's a really good idea, Nat. It's page 117. Yeah, that's what we'll do. As long as we say our page numbers, it'll help Matt to find it. Just keep talking. What would you like to know, Tom? Great. So yeah, they were just wee poems, but it was nice to include them. Sorry, it's page 117 is where we're at, Matt. If you're, yay, that's it, perfect. I'll just read that one again. So from Jeanette's workshop, House of Books. Books housing that thing that comes up about a space being enclosed or whatever the opposite of enclosed is. Unopened? Closed in order to be reopened again. The books support the literacy, fluency, agency, not read through at that point, or maybe builded into a strengthening. Kingstable Road Gate, sterile areas, WPSG, Kingstable like Dunstable, pronounce it that way with typo, lineate in a table, all staff will assist, WPSG, wiping? Trying to grasp what that WPSG must be, unsure clear. With sweeping, wepsing, weep, sing in the gardens as if required. And then the last thing I was going to read is page 111. This is a poem that I wrote, I was talking about a personal admin hoard. Some of the events that I went to with colleagues that were kind of loosely connected to the program I had notes from, and in particular we went to a panel, some of my colleagues were there with me, that we went to because Willie Docherty, one of our artists, was on at the International Festival in 2017. It was a really gripping panel about the role of arts in post-trauma situations. So I wrote a poem from the notes that I took there. Spirited Voices, Edinburgh International Festival, 9th of August 2017, #Spirit47. Alan Little Chair, Maya Zabib, Willie Docherty, Asa Aldegheri, Harriet Lamb. The problem with forgetting, the problem with remembering. That's from some notes on problems and possibilities, which I think is basically a poem that Willie Docherty wrote in our publication, Buried, from 2009. They've done the role of arts in other conflict. In Lebanon, the conflict always is present, political, not propaganda, not said, not dealt with. History, a concentrating face, pallid, clammy, multiple down below, a fire is glowing out in post-colonial context. Narrative steps out of their own narrative. Don't put children in a situation where you can't deal to group with the wound. Culture metaphors in fairy tales, for example, hold violence in them, knivings that she wanted to tell in that moment. Cannes, Aix-en-Provence. A way for Europeans to have eyes on each other. To the convex of north of Ireland, the face turns. I prepared something I thought I might read it. Why avoidance? The drama of voiding the human figure. A parallel activity to the broadcast media ban. Someone who lived proscribed in organization, limits of ban consequent the voices of actors, my use of voice over voice by the same actor will be shot, will kill somebody else. Murderer and victim share the self-same impulse, reading or being stopped in the center or sanctum. This level of attention and diplomacy, and I really face cut out for this. There still will be good things we act like we've forgotten. I have seen them serve the Europeans who've forgotten conflict to remind them there is need. There is just surviving. Waiting for Godot, sieged in Sarajevo, people risked their lives just to see it. Sontag brought us something UN couldn't. That was need, a lesson. Harriet, let me ask, a sponsor, when you have in mind a very brilliant work some 70 years ago, the guns fall silent. Thank you. To give voice, the mics drop out. Peace building, biggest battle, death, and North Korea ratcheting up, the citizens can come, can live together, Again, the people who've been brutalised, unless we invest in their humanity, because, let's face it, it is usually men. Tunisia's maybe lucky. What he'd know, through most his life he'll lived through conflict, can the end be as traumatic? Then the pressing ahead, it's right we come. We came and nothing happened. Because there is no justice, not just him, the history stops because no one agrees. Everybody knows where the mass graves are, but no one's will is opening them up. To open one grave up and not the other, imperative forget. Hard to accept. A Christian undertaking, this is your circumstance. The face, the hairs, this what is there, what do you mean peace? We started out from in history. We didn't think about the key, thank goodness. Symbol saw, seen in Amsterdam Eth Museum, same though different symbol ethery where I have killed people. People know militia, a year, then they don't know how to tackle, dividend exhausted, cohesion are exhausted, images are exhausted, come to in a process. To indulge, there's only so much setting aside that is sustainable. The words are exhausted. Politicians and political class very little prospect in this society. Society underestimates the arts. The other side of aspiration, that the arts can contribute, it's valuable work. It's not about the arts providing succour, but what else can they do? The language digging includes the funders, and where do you go from there? Curators of the National Gallery bought one work, but it stayed valuable, sole for its own sake. Behind me in this bit I found annoying, he's killed 10 members of her family. In a way he has no choice. Distinct behaviour. Percent of population are refugees. The Lebanese left because they're angry, alert. No wonder the Lebanese weren't welcoming, she smiles. After Syrian occupation, none of which in 1947, then the National Health Service was set up. In turn, a narrative of scarcity, or a society where people seek refuge. Cards. Whatever allows the imagination of the resentful person to admit the person to their own narratory. Lots of different mediums of shying away from conflicts reapplied. Prospectively demurring. For 3.5 hours flight, you're in Ukraine. This is ridiculous that we're at war. Millions of internally displaced places. People, can art be a force for bad? Murals put me in mind of the north of Ireland. Adopt language with the consent of community, hedging their bets until they can find, replace something is more aggressive, harder to speak. The art stops the art, the beak stops the beat. The only way the art could be of use is if it has effect on the way of government, on government itself in a mural amnesia. No one would take the trouble to hold condition for the bad reasons. At moment there's source of funding affecting narrative quality of the war work because it's political, all money's political, but you have to navigate through what each fund comes with, agenda. Do you have something about war? He's a good guy, but the question drives me crazy. We're always questioning our intentions. You have to know you're not helping. An expression that might otherwise not be happening, undoubtedly. Nazis used art always on both sides. Are we instrumentalizing art any better for peace than for war, unless it's negotiated? Vienna Philharmonic played in the building that inly unveiled a statue of the assassin, sharing the same compartment gesture, conciliation. We try to stay away from the government, to not be known by the government, because we want to be able to go on doing our work. We don't believe the people in the government are working for the people. Aggress him directly. Rel, our work is effect with sex, religion, politics. Preach to the choir, specific examples. In a country where gay men were put in jail, there's very little hope. Members of the company were leading untenably risked demonstrations. The post-conflict is very, very long sustainability. Where is there peace? Here. Peace is much more than absence of war. I'm scarring the pre-conflict easiness. The conflict departs, whatever that means. That work, maybe I'm ready. Ghost story remains at the Fruitmarket gallery. Provisions, police and control. an inheritance from the same family. Places exist, another phase, borders of words. I would, if I felt that having some shape in the language, actually opportune, meet two of the government, scratchedly, didn't go anywhere, not very deep. It's my to take serious comfort people might seeking, complacent, complicit, willing to share in order, sober around us doesn't allow to step. The street is responsibility, information, everyone murmurs completion pronunciation. You ask of a piece of art, extractive allows a single. This is two things, lives that never listen, Milan completely destroyed, the whole thing stated through motto, bojo, no notto, not finding an ending. Minefield on stage this evening, Malvinas veterans I'm drawn to. I'm drawn into that one. Then Martin Creed with his table. Can someone develop without imposing this mode? The power of art, the choice is not given resources to storyline through, to pose yourself at people bracing their sames for grand criticism. So I'm going to hand over to Jeanette.
Amazing. Okay, so I only have a few poems, just 5 minutes. Oh, I've got double mic, so I'll stand over here. Just have a 5-minute set for you today because I'm screening a film poem that I collaborated with Annalie Holmstrom, the wonderful artist that's here all the way from Finland today that I'm just so excited about. Round of applause for Annalie. Woo! To sit back later and not have to worry. But for now, 3 poems. I'm just understanding this book. I thought it was going to be a pamphlet. And then I got handed this giant catalogue. And I'm like, wow, I want to break the spine. Okay. So, Iain has asked me to read a few of these selected ones. This is called Ghazal, Change of Heart. Oh, sorry. It's 33, which is my lucky number. So that feels good, right? Okay. Oh, yeah? That's it? That's all you need? Okay. Right. Oh, okay. All right. So the microphone's gone. All right. Guys, that was a lot going on there. Right. Ghazal, Change of Heart. These kerosene cities felt at the pip of my heart like a little spat out thunderbolt, prone to tip and capsize at any moment of transient shapeshift to catapult change. In a fetishistic age of communication, ghosts are familiars, spectres approaching, holding their breath. What would they say on exhale? Wise voices, reflectors of change. I have never seen you angry. It happens about once a year and it's spectacular. We hack at bricks and mortar, keep finding more rooms, more air, more art, breach lenticular change. I want to be as majestic as a mountain, said the building in utero of sky, enacting suicide on the track's edge, involvement of the dark unseen, our hero, change. And the fish knew not to find out how quicksand was tolerable enough for touch. Love was lost, then found again, resuscitated from the mineral and ample stuff of change. Serenading midnight strays, the fruit market on stilts, pilgrims at the station disrobed. Who can resist this attunement to nature, culture, a craving, dedication for change? Insomnia told me its dreams. And this is after the Louise Bourgeois exhibition in 2014, and it's on page 39. Thank you. Wintry sunset struts, begin to seduce our end of the year, anonymous and untethered, like a married woman in a hotel, trying on a new expensive dress, counting her hibernation stash, where the moon takes photographs of umbrella pines and cypresses in a milky setting and offers them to her as she finds a means for release. Sleep, sleep, sleep. Outside, the radial tick of tires, those dervish transmitters. Do not get into cars with strangers, yet we let them into our beds. We are being locked in again alongside everything that we have gathered in life so far. Leftover night hours, pets, kids, books, plants, lovers, and crockery. And as stray mantras introduce themselves for the 1,000,000th time, I find a Louise Bourgeois exhibition program let slip with a memory out of a selected Rilke book, like a ghost behind a shower curtain, the scent reminiscent of a last meeting before marriage robbed her from me. Have you ever been in love? She had asked then, swirling her finger in the air like before an insomnia drawing. I have told myself it was love at the time so I could feel it. I replied with sincerity and an eyebrow raise. For love is not a tomb in the hurricane heart waiting to be disrobed. There is a deep cyclone instead that shapes the cloud into a comma. I feel the snow fall from within me. Snakes and marshmallows, loins, koi fish, weave of hair. Woken right up by Bourgeois now, her spellbook of painting on top of print, bloodwork, cartilage, artichoke leaf, four-eyed forehead. Fear and beauty on paper absorbing into the room. The slipstream between past and present, fingerprint between reality and imagination. Like all the girls' eyes in the bathroom, feigning as wide as Ferris wheels as we went deeper into the night, deeper into the grass market, where insomnia leaks its dreams of breath and touch and blinding music, lifting essence out of its heavy bones. Long art gallery afternoons to diaphanous AM connections, living and dead ensembles. Honeymoon, diaspora, red ink kisses. I have collected them all. Life's a perpetual audition of returning lovers from the moors of our subconscious. Thank you for the clap, that's sweet. So this last one is called Love Stems from the Sudden Urge to Make Permanent What Only Passes By, and it's page 42. I feel like I'm in class. So students, if you would just like to turn to the front. Okay, art is where the multiverse lives, where parallel time movements allow the past to still exist. Future plus past plus present, all at once. Timeless space of galleries. People dissociate from time. The pool of life paused at their heels to manifest the beauty of the past and suspend themselves away from the frantic traffic of the truck tug forward. We are modeling experience. It is all sculpture. Audiences need to feel part of the process. Interpretation, reverie. Analysis, creativity. Deconstruction, enigma. Reconstruction, repair. Creator, curator, spectator, writer. Creator, curator, collector, spectator, writer. Art showcases the novelty of liberation, of imagination for us all. Creator, curator, collector, spectator, writer. Creator, curator, collector, spectator, writer. Thank you. Yeah. Say that again, sorry. Oh yeah, Annalie's going to introduce the film. Is that okay, darling? All right.
Okay. Hello, as Jeanette said, my name's Annie Holmstrom. I'm a visual artist from Edinburgh, currently living and working in Finland. First of all, I'd like to thank the Fruitmarket and Iain in particular for the invitation to screen this film today. It feels really special for me to show this film at the Fruitmarket Gallery, as I'm from Edinburgh and it's been a long time being away from the city. I would also like to thank Svenska Kulturfond and Platform's New Normal commissions for supporting the financing for the film. In addition, I'd also like to thank the generous contributions of friends and artists, one of whom today is here, Walter Cooney, for the production support that made the film happen as well. So the film that you're about to see is the result of a year-long collaboration between myself and Janette Ayachi and Finnish filmmaker and sound artist Joakim Finnholm. This collaboration was instigated by Janette, who invited me to collaborate during her time as a writer in residence during writer shift. At the time, I was based in Lisbon, but we had agreed to meet later on in the year to discuss ideas in person around the archive. But not long after, the pandemic happened, and so travel was seeming more and more unlikely. But instead, we started to share ideas online, passing images and text from the archive, and slowly, themes around the pandemic quickly started to begin feeding into our thinking. At some point, we settled on this word membrane as a kind of anchor point for this dialogue we were having. As our thoughts evolved, I then invited a third collaborator in the chain, who was filmmaker and sound artist Joakim Finnholm, to work together on a film piece to house the ideas that we've been germinating. The final results, Membrane, is a film which is a fusion of each of these creators' intuitive response to a very specific cultural moment. In this way, the film is kind of a catalyst for poetry, visual art, soundscaping, and interweaves to find a single voice. That through art making, perhaps, we can find forms of knowledge or give a shape to feelings that we might not yet have words for. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the film. Thank you for having me.
Where Things Are When They Are Not Happening. Membrane, Part 1. Naming the dead on slabs of stone or plaques on benches, names chiseled from the mouths of marble statues, will not grant their return. Infinity's classic cult of anonymous cadavers will crack the landscape's cyclical smoothness, where even the towns forget their own names, assume aliases for passers-by. Names are the same in any language, just like screams. Insomnia allows me to try on different pronunciations of breath. Where to look if not the looking glass, monologues in the room of mirrors, characters all scripted with their name before each line. Such a spectacle, this miracle of being alive. Membrane, Part 2. The psychoid unconscious is now awake, an imperfect work after an opus. Something came back tainted, a jealous chimera that reserves judgment, a fetus that consumes its own twin. Keep the lines in place. The transparent wall connects and divides. Is it true that the only comfort is love? A membranous meeting of hearts, sourced from the remotest of galaxies. Do we salute or separate, something worse than a silhouette, living out eternity? Every day more crowded, which plant, which hunt, within the molecular clash, the plural, no possession, question after question, a structured scuba dive song, losing its own religion. I send poems to the muscular body, see how you censor breath and speech at the same time. Write to yourself. Your body must be heard, overheard, and held. I overflow. My desires have invented new desires. My body now knows a herd of songs. I aim for magnetic attraction that is very consuming. A delta force flood, a massive spill. I used to look for that masculine power, the one I thought I needed, the one I thought I was entitled to. I dance so full, I feel it re-amplified, permeated into skin, feel burn when lovers unravel under their own moons. I purge from you, triggered and spent and full and happy, a nodal charm, but I reach sadness because love let me down. And in this swell, I pull under from our ankles when we were content floating, facing Hades, our fears, the underworld, our worst witch, our childhood trauma, divisions, nightmares, ghost sightings, sleep paralysis, the argument of night, the desperate need for isolation to play around with masks of identities, a sensitivity that settles in its swing of tears. As the pain vibrates, it invites in the love, the lovers, the friends, the fuel, the present tense of touch and taste, and small gifts tied to the third eye, like carnival light shows in outback deserts. This is the kernel, the core, the crunching under the thick of Earth's magma. Love, love at the heart of the Earth. One source energy, a pulse that promotes peace, stifles tragedy. Earth shows us how to fill up from within, shows herself how to mimic, to suck at her own wrists for solvent, to mine our bodies, a process of ejection. My body has taken its bash. Asthma spirals, exasperated, medicinally controlled to emergency rooms and double dosing. Puffers puff their course, cortice-starred, corticosteroids. Everything is about to blow. Mind and spirit now rising. Astral projection on low oxygen levels, a speedy recovery to follow, inflammation of the imagination, the turn of filthy organs, seasoned only on one side. We all need a moment to be light again on a yacht in Cannes after dealing the density. Life lived through our feelings in centrality rather than through our intellects. What a strong mechanical cure. Do not try to contain people now that they have been contained before. Cutting shadows from clocks, a white gazelle waking by the lake. It all ends and begins here. Even the gutter agrees, a poor isotope, forever friend or forever foe. The excitement of something new, or the retracting, retracing over old misery. Split it in two and share out the seeds. Daydreamer, night thinker, I am baffled by mediocrity. I am promiscuous, I can't keep secrets. I am a fool for love. I am a fool for being here. No insignia, no weapons, no barbarian powers at all. I am an Art Deco caterpillar, clumsy enough to look up and see my own eyelashes. The final editing of my final book will be interrupted by my death. I dream without volume. Membrane, Part 3. Scientists say their prayers. Saints in paintings have the lips of liars. They start out thin and have been starved for centuries, kept alive and afloat by reserves or restoration and pools of popular culture, a holster of broken promises, always within reach. These moments of departure, watching you leave, like staring into the sun when there is snow in the hills. Noticing me now, for the first time in minutes. Under the skin, we chant old DNA patterns, ancient traumas, often Malsifium invades, killers exercising pressure points on the body to put their victims to sleep. Sleeper cells lined in the outskirts of each district, each window waiting for the signal from their souls, as distant as the sound of galloping horses on a canvas. Flood warnings in other distant places, the world's waters breaking, long laborious seasons served their incubation time. Birds descend from the sky as if by parachute, land like they are on skis, take to flight so quick after bore of the grass, the curt leaves, the hibernating worm. Let me bloom inside you, like a narcotic flower, feeling for rapture through the empty night, only to wake up one day to a new face, my body stretching slowly to fold into a shaft of sunlight, astringent, soft, and seductive, knowing all the right moves for pleasure, the right angles for posture. Live full, die well, agitate our death denial. We hide our corpses, warehouse our elderly, and fixate on youthfulness. Life seems sated if death is postponed. But in our locus of consciousness, we all know the impermanent self cannot be made permanent through such accoutrements. Viruses and millionaires replicate. Now we can be electronically handled, with no freedom of assembly, without anarchy retracting claws. But disaster liberates solidarity and insulates love. We have lost sovereignty of our bodies in the security state of liminal lockdown. All hugs and handshakes and carnal liberties ushered into virtual physicality, pin-ups in the web of life, cosmic makeup, cosmetic shake-up, night falls on desolate junctions. Elsewhere, another slide experiment. People find ways to be together. A baby cries under a bird's watch. I have forgotten what this is like, to listen to other people's noise. Islanders are the original isolators. We have all been islanded. What do we need to carry on our backs to brace storms? Each tiny house with windows that reach out to the sea. To be totally surrounded and receive a bandit's luck of gifts washed up on the shore into our hands, our embrace. What materials can we source from what we have already been given in our separate land and pod? There is beauty and growth in relatively barren circumstances. Even in the most desolate, harshest environments, there is life. A membrane separates the interior cells from the outside environment, stops salutes going in and out. It controls movements of substances in and out of cells and organelles, cells signaling to each other, look up, look up. A prism of prisons hook up to the main line, the skyline, the safety barge of filtering media. We choose what we conduct, infiltrate truth through permeable barriers, wake up the maestro in our cell self. Spirit self stands on guard. Stand back from yourself, this tissue between regions. Men manning the membrane, hiking up the sails of skirts, touching the untouched first. Where was my body's border control when I needed it? Neutral or charged, a woman decides, but a girl knows no invitation. How does this live on in the cells, in the memory, in the streets? Stagnation, stale nation, curled larvae, cruel chrysalis, long stills, a green so green each pigment swallowed a jungle. Turn the empty wine bottle like a telescope. The luminary astral world of lockdown lies at the end of a lens. To step back, to sleep, to appease the oppressor. Malignant egos don't make noise or waves or love through the rain of cardinal terror. Mother thinks we will all emerge with webbed feet. Membrane, Part 4. Slave traders are dragged to harbors. They have been holding their breath. Now they are drowning. The black body lynched and rolled. The smashing of glass in the middle of night, shafting into temporal vanishing points. It is art in its destruction, like our chaotic fabric of living, a universal compulsion to capture the now, televised and viral in collective conscious stream, cult disposal, hyper-awareness, erasure, removal of the foul-smelling dead. More than 21 grams, a dumbed-down necrosis. Airwaves run the post-digital radio, the revolution in the air. Faces of statues subdued, they have no say, their lips wielded shut with bronze and pollution and false glorification. Braided bodies, an assemblage of physical form, more rigid than fluid, but The model becomes the object it models. The transfer becomes mobile, effigies and totem poles, the burning man, this hammock doll, Guy Fawkes, scarecrows and puppets. How do we interact with it? The protests, the water opening its jaw, mold rising in closed restaurant kitchens against fingerprint and polished chrome. Hives save lives, save statues, save slaves, save slave. Churchill is in a box and the elders do not need to nap in the afternoon anymore. Local produce is delivered, the angry ones march, the quiet ones get quieter as window frame streetlights are outwatted by the misty June light. A summer of scandals, of rubber bullets and mouthless, noseless faces, protection and disguise, and the threat of viruses like terrorism never really goes away. Coping mechanisms become more inventive, snaps at hard water. Even the rain feels calcified, the air oxygenated, daylight doused in a milky film of propagation, stalks snipped under pageantry of seasonal skies, the impure cure pulled by its hair, its roots. Placebos on a clutch. Don't look back, they say, or down, or now, or away. It must be exciting out there. The danger, the adrenaline, the riots and songs of cheer, the candles swaying above boombox ballads. I imagine myself on a rooftop, smoking, watching it all. Some vast city, born and born and born again. Because suburbia has stopped using verbs, has stopped their applause. Nature is untrammeled by human suffering. Life lives on, slower, amplified, cherished, bricks and mortar, an impulse for more garden furniture. And in the eternal present, I dream of takeoff. I dream of takeoff. I dream of takeoff. I dream of takeoff. Of takeoff. Forgetful 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 of takeoff.
Thank you so much. Wow. Let's just take a minute. The first poem I'm reading is about the two sites that we worked from when the Fruitmarket was closed down in order to extend its premises. So the Fruitmarket moved into becoming a bookshop in the Mall. So this poem addresses the whole locale of where the Fruitmarket bookshop was for a year and this present Fruitmarket. Here too there was fruit. I want to acknowledge we stand here on common land, bought by this city's common good fund. In 1776, common good funds bought land for the new town. Yes, the land here beneath the Fruitmarket gallery, before it was a fruit market, this land became the common land where we stand, including the land here beneath this mall. Yes, this mall is built on common land. This station is built on common land. Market Street is built on common land. Visit any town in Scotland, any town. Look for Market Street, Market Muir names that denote common land in any town. In feudal times, the common good funds were protected in every Scottish town. We stand here on common land, bought by the town council from the trustees of Heriot's Hospital. The Common Good Fund was and is a free fund to be used for the common good of the inhabitants of the burgh, a free fund to be used to be build common wealth and prosperity in a new Enlightenment city, Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of the Scott monument troubles my sight. What could a new Enlightenment city be that is not served by a station named for a piece of unionist fiction penned by the ghastly incumbent of that vast, silly, neo-Gothic, necrolattic stone edifice that looms over common good funded common land, lurching towards bankruptcy. I saw it at its finest in the 1990s, wrapped in scaffold and tarpaulin. Truly, it looked gorgeous for the only time. So sonsy, so cubistic, it was alive, about to fly away, its tarpaulin wings sunning themselves in our common sunlight, or flip-flapping in our common dreich, or raging in our common rains, iced by common snows, howling in our common bitter winds. The first fruit market stood where the station now stands. The second fruit market stood here on this spot where this fruit market pop-up shop pops up. That second fruit market fruited for 94 years until 1938, when the third fruit market opened on Market Street, and this site of the second fruit market then hosted cattle shows, dog shows, car shows, the Ideal Home shows, and the Great North Welly Boot Fringe Show, starring Billy Connolly, in the year before it was demolished and became a car park. In 1973, for 10 years, still, Common Good Fund funded common land. I want to acknowledge we stand here on common land, yet this mall is built on common land. The city has leased out the solus, or site, since 1982 to a string of companies who bought and sold the lease for millions, yes, millions, starting with Reed Publishing Pension Trustees Limited and Reed Pension Trusts Limited, Let Invest PLC and Speciality Shops PLC, Scottish Metropolitan PLC, Continental Shelf 274 PLC, then Pro Limited Partnership sold it in 2005 for 37 million quid to David Murray's PPG Metro Limited. The annual rent roll then stood at 2.3 million. Andy Whiteman says the Common Good Fund of the City of Edinburgh lets the site for a rent of a penny a year, if asked. When in 2188 the lease runs out, the Common Good Fund will have earned £2.60, if asked, and precisely nothing if not asked. The lease on the Waverley Mall is now owned, says Google, by the investment group Tradehold, supported by billionaire Christo Weiss, has restructured itself into a property company with an unusual mix of UK, South African and Namibian assets. The joint CEO, Friedrich Esterhaus, said the company that has invested in more than 14 billion rands worth of property can now pay dividends regularly and can offer shareholders exposure to a defensive mix of UK commercial properties and a strong portfolio of industrial properties in South Africa and Namibia. South Africa and Namibia. Hardly are those words out when a vast image of multinational global corporate exploitation, expropriation, and centuries of Scotland's wealth built on transatlantic slavery again troubles my sight. Namibia means vast land, vast land. Namibia is not our vast land. Namibia's expropriated wealth, I want to ask, should it underpin our common good funded common land? I ask this in a poem made for the Fruitmarket Gallery, made crossing the first and between the third and second sites of local fruit markets built on common land, fruit markets rebuilt as the Fruitmarket Gallery and the Fruitmarket pop-up. It's the 20th of November 2019. I want to acknowledge we stand here on common land, funded by common good funds. Here now there is art. Here now is poetry. Here too there was fruit. You just tell me what that page number is. It's so tiny.
73?
73. This is a poem dedicated to Louise Dick, who is in the audience tonight and will be running a workshop on Saturday morning. On growth and form, Fibonacci's for Louise Dick. It's the growth of the artist, the form of the work, says Louise Dick. Here she sits on sweet radius vector of Fruitmarket. What then is its pole of Fruitmarket, from which she spirals all her certain velocity into terminal growth of this artist, the form of her work, the force of her work's spiraling magnitude, its direction in, out of Fruitmarket, in and out of Fruitmarket, from which she spirals, form from which all her work spirals. What is the Fruitmarket form from which all her work spirals? Form, from, ram, form, battering, ram, battering, ram. Battering ram is the first thing Louise Dick looked at, thinking, this is unusual. It must. It must be modern art. It's modern art. It was 1975. Louise Dick, 15 years old, looks at Battering Ram by her teacher. Her teacher, John Kirkwood, artist. John Kirkwood, artist, teacher, took his art class from Craig Royston's school to the Fruitmarket. This school, says Louise Dick, is in one of Europe's most deprived places. This teacher, just imagine it, took us from that place to look at modern art. Scottish sculpture, 75, presented by the Richard DeMarco Gallery. Louise Dick looked at her teachers, her own art teacher's artwork, Battering Ram, with its debris on the wall. Battering Ram, huge machine, like a gun, like a huge gun, facing a wall like it had splattered stuff, like who knows, insulating stuff, debris splattered all over it. To be told by your teacher, let's all go into the city centre and this is my work. Can you imagine the impact? Not just on me. Craig Royston School made so many artists. Brian Gibb, painter. Paul Duke, photographer. Davy Duke, painter. Joyce Gunn Cairns, before us. After Images, City Art Centre in 1985 showcased Craig Royston's finest stuff, including Louise Dick's We Too in the City. We Too in the City. Picture We Too in the City Art Centre and facing the Fruitmarket, just as Louise Dick is back from St Martin's School of Art, London. Sweet radius vector of Fruitmarket. Soon she spirals. Who taught Louise Dick at St Martin's in the time of the Allegory Boys, I ask? All that mythy and meaty new narrative painting. Just when concept art almost killed off mark making. If John Kirkwood had changed her life, absolutely. Who in London had changed her life like that, with such an intense impact? Who even cared? Eileen Cooper, her tutor, spoke the language of figurative colorist paint. She saw too in her own work, Gillian Ayres spoke up for mark making's sake, for joyous expression, gestural paint. But art college is so much more than tutelage. Louise Dick lived in Hackney in patchwork housing, a hotbed of talents, hung out with bands like the Mekons and the Scars and the Slits. She sang with the fire engines. I saw her live on Top of the Pops, sweet, joyous expression. Then she was back. Her certain velocity once more through the door of the Fruitmarket. This is the growth of this artist, this the form of her work. This form, this force of her work's very magnitude, its direction spirals in, out of Fruitmarket. Now she is gallery assistant. Now she assists Fruitmarket artists in the time of Mark Francis. For 4 years, she worked on the shoulders of giants. She says, not kidding. First show, paintings by Gilbert and George, followed by Helen Chadwick, Gerhard Richter, Cindy Sherman et al. In The Mirror and the Lamp. The two best shows, says Louise Dick, for her the most formative, Richard Hamilton and Nancy Spiro. But for every single show, it was her job to unpack the van, pretty much hands-on, install all the work, then public education. Can you imagine being taught how to mix dust and pigment for Anish Kapoor, to scatter on the floor like pods and seeds? Or how about smearing paint like excrement on walls, Bobby Sands style, for Ulysses by Richard Hamilton, using 2 fingers. He went to Stockton jail to get the mattress and rug. 1988, Bobby Sands was dead. 7 years his cell in Long Kesh, replicated in form to house his diptych portrait. Smear paint, 2 fingers marking excrement like the megalithic spirals of Newgrange, the Gaelic convolutions of the Book of Kells, is what the artist said of Citizen. Joyous expressions, gestural paint, sweet radius vector of Fruitmarket. How soon do these spirals grow? Spirals forming from spirals. This the growth and the form. This is the growth of this artist. This the form of her work. Growth and form is the title of the ICA show made by Richard Hamilton for the Festival of Britain 1951. On Growth and Form by Darcy Thompson, natural lyric scientist of beauty in the mathematics of organic forms, spirals. How they grow, how do they form in nature? They form by pole and radius vector in ratios of golden mean, a Fibonacci. Form of process, mind-blowing, says Louise Dick. Mind-blowing, all the more she now lives in the very house where Darcy Thompson was born. Just how crazy is that, Jane? Imagine telling Richard Hamilton all these years later, I live in the house where Darcy Thompson was born. Crazy. Louise Dick, out of Fruitmarket, spirals. This the growth and the form. This is the growth of this artist. This the form of her work. Now she's left teaching. 25 years of teaching art. She lives in the house of the man who put curves into numbers and words, sweet radius vector of Fruitmarket. Louise Dick, this teacher of art, she has taught in St. Augustine's, Edinburgh, Broxburn Academy, Dean's Community High School, Livingston, Wester Hales, then West Calder High School and Musselburgh. Every day in the classroom for these 25 years, Louise Dick has made art with her students. Now she spirals, new joyous expression, gestural paint. She makes art in the house where Darcy Thompson was born. how these spirals grow, spirals forming from spirals, this the growth, this the form, this is the growth of this artist, this the form of her work. We talk about the drawings of Nancy Spiro, running women, printed figures reprinted in overlays, dance, scroll. Notes in Time on Women, sweet radius vector of Fruitmarket. Now Louise Dick is mark-making, joyous expression, gestural, paint. This artist spirals. She spirals in all her certain velocity. Louise Dick paints in questions, asks of bleak areas where dreams are made, how change is made. She asks in gestural, lyrical, live, mark-making paint, where do we get this idea that something can change? Things can change, be different. Sweet radius vector of Fruitmarket. Louise Dick grows. She spirals new work. She will call it On Growth and Form. Thank you.
I left a book. Is that my book? Oh, great, thank you. It's lovely to hear all these things weren't in the world before Iain asked us to join him. And I think everything here is Iain's big poem. It's all his. So I would like to thank Iain and thank all the writers, shifters, and everybody in the Fruitmarket who's helped to make this happen. If you open your Pew hymn books at page 131, you will find the first poem. Thank you very much, Matt. When the project began, Poems and Art Gallery, I thought, well, we should really have a conversation between a poem and an art gallery. Conversation. Hello, I am an art gallery. An impressive structure, I think you'll agree. Oh, hello, I am a poem. I am also a structure. Without a structure, I too would fall down. I am an art gallery. I am constantly changing. When you walk into me, you do not know what you might find. Indeed, I am a poem. I am set in my ways. But when you walk into me, my hope is also that you do not know what fresh discoveries you might make. I am a forest with hidden trails. And I, a gallery, am a country always with new thresholds you can cross. I ask of you nothing but that you cross these with me and are open to whatever landscapes you may find. Indeed, but I am a poem. You can slip me into your pocket and take me anywhere you choose, over any number of borders. That is my gift, though I must change my plumage as I go. I know what you're getting at, but I am an art gallery. I stand where I stand. Whatever plumage I wear, I must wear it here. The idea of me, on the other hand, will survive beyond these walls, beyond any walls that try to contain it, as will the idea of you. Further than that, No one need show favour to either of us. This is the next poem's on 133, and it's Fruitmarket extension, and this is a very beautiful building, and the extension, before it was the extension, was a very beautiful building too. I like buildings when they get old and on the point of ruin. But there were, when we were walking around it, there were flashes of colour still left from the time when it was a nightclub, Buster Brown's. I think there's people here who've danced in Buster Brown's. And so this is called the Fruitmarket extension. When we can still breathe unmasked, space has innocence, anonymity. We cup it and let it go like a fly we failed to capture. We trap it best by building around it, turning space into place. As here, though any enclosure carries history, its own, or one memory or imagination may give it. This building is hollowed out like the hold of a ship. Absence broods in its corners, yet enough colour, even an electric orange, still gestures within it to recall a vibrant joy, a place where hearts once beat in the pursuit of soft fruits. And beyond that, there is the scent, dreamt in the air, of orchard and of earth and the calls of commerce. Nor is it hard to imagine a sacred place, a dusty but respectable history, a lozenge of light, hesitant, newborn, one of those Le Corbusier conjured at Ronchamp, flickers from one wall. Think of an altar candle, struggling to catch, till confident, forthright and steady, it illuminates corners you thought light had rarely cared to reach. This is another poem when we were mooching around the old site, and it's called Portrait in Light. And it takes off from a poem that Iain read earlier. Here I am writing this down out of Tom's way so as to respect his. For all that, here I am hiding in your poem. The hesitancy behind the bluster, the receding hairline, the fleshy nose. Now you call from me a similar respect as we knit the cobbled limits of the neighbourhood. We belong to all countries. The local is the universal minus the walls. Your laughter is light and ready, your face a lantern lit with joy. Is this the way, please God, the world can be? If so, you bring those who greet you halfway there. In the gallery to be, I took a picture of you, notebook in hand, unconsciously posed before a panel of light. The sun blesses your face, Rembrandting it, a patina of time brushing your golden whiskers. And as Rembrandt overlooks nothing, there it also is, the concentration, the seriousness that playfulness demands. Before you, to paraphrase a poem of Brecht's, lauding Charles Laughton, the arc of your belly is performed, like a poem for your edification and no one's discomfort. I can send the picture if you'd like. I thought Iain took that in good spirit, but just earlier on out there, he said to me, he said, Tom, has somebody been drawing on your nose? And I said, oh no, it's just your veins. This is a prose piece called Rebirth. We began this project with Brexit, and then the pandemic began, and our work for this project was affected like everything else. I think in a way the project is about time, and it's... Sorry? Page number, if you open your hymn books, page 142. And in a way, it's terrible to be reading because there's another very clear historical marking tonight. Anyway, this is Rebirth. Because our imaginations took different routes once we could no longer meet. And anyway, Rebirth. It is a large building that had stood empty for some years. Before I was born, it had been a market of some sort, specialising in fruit and vegetables, fresh farm produce, brought in from the surviving collective farms and allotments. But no use had been found for it lately, till an order was issued that, on account of the plague, the streets were to be cleared immediately of the homeless. Crude wooden bunks were built inside the old market. The homeless were gathered from the crevices, the overhangs and the tunnels, where it was known they passed the cold nights, and brought to the old market. They stayed there, living on soup and bread, till accommodation could be found that would keep them out of mind, till a common cure could return them to their begging. The old market was by now a prime site, for the hospitals were at breaking point, and new spaces were called for that could be easily transformed into wards for the afflicted. The shaky wooden bunks were removed, and iron beds and medical materials introduced. In spite of dedicated nursing staffs, death tolls continued to mount everywhere. In the ward of the old market, no more than anywhere else. Nevertheless, reason was anyone's mistress at the time, and it was suggested that the old market was too hospitable to infection. Its rough brickwork could not be scoured. Alternative, more suitable wards had been improvised at the airport and at the docks. The extant patients were evacuated to one of these, and the building cleared once more. The final purpose of the old market in the dark times was as a mortuary. As a mortuary, it had universal approval. After all, there is little need to prevent a corpse from coming into contact with another corpse. Neither has anything to lose. And so these prematurely fallen fruits were brought through the silent streets and stacked in a place where an account could be taken of them before their final dispatch. The old market was not alone among the buildings and the streets and the neighbourhoods that needed memory to settle before it could be reborn. But when it was, as a contemporary art gallery, the news was greeted with surprise and delight. Rebirth! At the opening of its first carefully chosen exhibition, one which favoured sensuous over intellectual pleasure, the new director spoke of a building that had known seasons of growth and seasons of tragedy. She was proud to be inaugurating a fresh season of growth. Everyone balanced their glasses of wine and clapped with the rapture of forgetfulness. But I know from the many comments Magda carefully copies out and sends to me that I am not alone in being unable or unwilling to forget the present building's provenance. Thank you for this exhibition. I shall come again. I expect to learn new artists' names, yet always for the art to vibrate with a feverish life, as if each mark is prized from the dark-edged frame that holds it.
So I'm thinking maybe we should stop there because we've gone over so much. But I feel like that's maybe as good a point to end tonight's reading and then leave people to grab the book.
Okay, can I thank Kate very much for these beautiful drawings that are these beautiful paintings. Beautiful paintings.
There's more events this weekend. Jill Smith, the first woman in the Fruitmarket's program, is here in the front row. She's giving a talk about her work tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock, and there's still space for that, and it's online. So check that out. And then they said, dig it. Why not? But thanks again for joining us tonight. It's been a wonderful celebration.